Hello, welcome to the Climate Blue podcast. My name is Dan Rolinson. I'm joined here this morning live on YouTube for the first time in a long time with John Townley. John, how are you, pal? You okay?
Yeah, doing well, thank you, Dan. Big game tomorrow night.
Yeah? Cut that out, we'll start again.
Yeah, the bonus for doing it live. Big game tomorrow night, press conference in about an hour or two. So we're not going to rush this, of course, but let's see what Unai says about the many subjects that are, I say, up in the air maybe at the moment. Lots of different questions that fans would like to ask, I'm sure. So hopefully we can get some good answers from Unai later.
Yeah, it's a busy week for Villa, isn't it, with two games against Newcastle United and Sheffield United, and it feels like a busy Monday already, and we're only at 11 o'clock. As you said, there's plenty of subjects to talk about, and I've got about 10 questions in front of me here. We are live as well, by the way, so if any come through whilst we're on air, we'll probably go off in a few different tangents as well. As you said, the Unai Emery press conference is like early this afternoon, so there's going to be some things here that we might talk about, and when people catch up with this podcast, new information is already out and things maybe are out of date already. So there's some things that we won't speculate on for the sake of speculation. And starting with speculation, let's talk about Jacob Ramsey to begin with. The first question is from Dibsy, who says, "Hi Dan and John. On Jacob Ramsey, can you please tell us that the open to sell line is nonsense? All fans really want is a homegrown player to be part of the success, and FFP is killing any chance of competing with this Sky 6 year in, year out." And I think you can take that in two answers, really. We could talk about the kind of desire for a homegrown player second. The Jacob Ramsey stuff, as I said, it's been a busy morning. It all really only came out today. David Ornstein, kind of the oracle of transfers, alongside Fabrizio Romano, reporting that Newcastle had got an interest for Jacob Ramsey or had made an approach, I think was the line. And then Eddie Howe's had an early morning press conference, and when asked about it, he said that is incorrect. So kind of a story out of nowhere and then quashed within an hour or so. Is that the situation? Is that as much as we know?
As much as we know so far. Again, obviously, Unai is speaking to the media later, and I don't expect him to be adding too much context to it. However, what I would say is that we've obviously known for a period of time now that Villa's FFP situation isn't, severe, not as severe as Newcastle's, who know that they're going to have to sell a big asset or maybe a couple. And that's kind of my first point of why I was surprised that Newcastle were linked, because they'd have to sell someone for big money to bring in a £50 million player, or, at least £50 million is the kind of price tag on Ramsey, if that report is to be believed. But what I would say is that, we are aware that for Villa to grow and to improve, they have to work their way to try and compete with these big six teams, and it is a bit of a cartel. Let's not beat around the bush. I'm going to ask Emery later about does he think the rules are fair, because Villa are trying to compete with those teams whose revenue streams are their revenue streams are, the Deloitte Money League came out last week. Tottenham's revenue is more than double Villa's. It's staggering. Like, it really kind of puts it into perspective. Villa can do all they can on the pitch, but they are limited, and that's just true in terms of how they can compete in the market and improve as a football club until they can get those revenue streams that Newcastle are also trying to strive for as well. Like Villa, for example, have obviously spent a lot of money, more so than, for example, Brighton, who obviously make a lot of money as well. And between our revenues, their revenue isn't so much less than what ours is, especially when you compare us to the big six, for example. So Villa have got a massive way to go to kind of being a club that's able to spend lots of money every year without thinking, oh, this academy graduates, going to have to leave or whatever. And I'll say straight away, I don't know what Villa's books are. I don't think anyone does, unless you're told from, someone within the club. So I'm not going to suggest that I'm, know exactly the situation, because I don't. But what I would say is that we know that because we're not a big six, as you said earlier, Dan, we're not one of those clubs. Our revenue streams are less. And if we want to compete, then we are going to have to balance the books somewhere along the line. Don't get me wrong, I'd be surprised if Jacob Ramsey was to go, especially in the coming days. That's not something that I'd expect. However, if David Ornstein is correct, and I don't, have no reason to doubt that he is, that isn't correct, then Villa will apparently need to make some sort of money before June to comply with the PSR. And that's not to suggest that that money can't be raised elsewhere. Obviously, Villa have got
Mm.
more assets in their team, but we all know that pure profit, £50 million as an academy graduate on the books, that is attractive in terms of, you know, that side of it, which I don't even like talking about it because it makes me feel quite sick, because you look at Chelsea, what they're doing, other clubs as well. You know, some fans of other teams will tell you they're in a crisis. Chelsea not getting Champions League, Man United falling away. It's honestly, it's laughable compared to the situation that we would be in and that Newcastle are in. We're trying to get to that level, and we're, you know, looking behind our shoulders thinking, what we're going to have to do with this team. Do we have to sell some of our academy players, our star assets, just to bring some more in and, you know, balance the books? That's the situation that it is. But again, I don't know for certain where the truth is in terms of Villa have to sell this amount of, raise this amount of cash to comply with FFP. I don't know that situation, and I wouldn't suggest that I do. But see what happens in the coming days. I suppose Emery will speak about it. I don't know how. At what length, but it's not a situation that's particularly pleasant, because you just don't want that, you know, to kind of cloud your season in a way, because we're doing so well, and then this report comes out that Villa need to raise a bit of money. It's just not something that you want to be reading about. But yeah, hopefully more will come out in the coming days, and you know.
Yeah, it's one of those ones that I mentioned at the start. We don't want to speculate. We don't want to talk about specific numbers or selling certain individuals or where Villa are in comparison to other clubs. The way Eddie Howe was speaking about Newcastle was like, if we sign anyone, we have to let somebody go. Now, I don't see that being the case for Villa. We're obviously linked with Morgan Rogers quite heavily, and we'll talk about him later on in the show. There's no talk that, well, before we can agree that deal, we have to get rid of somebody now. Villa selling players in the summer, yeah, possibly. Like we've all talked before, haven't we? Douglas Luiz, 100 million to Arsenal or whoever it is. Maybe that's the way that Villa get funds in. Champions League qualification would be hugely important, and that will go some way to bring in some amount of funds in. Getting rid of Bertrand Traore's wages, someone like Callum Chambers, whoever it is, there's ways to make money before making a big sale. But as you say, selling an academy graduate, it's pure profit, isn't it, on the accountancy books or whatever the phrase is. So that's like an easy way. It's almost an easy link that club needs to make money, sell a homegrown player. Like that's an easy way to do it. Whether that's necessarily true or not is something we'll have to wait and see. Do I think Jacob Ramsey will leave before the deadline this week? Absolutely not. I'd be surprised by that. Could he leave in the summer? Yeah, possibly. Who knows? I think this idea that I had a tweet before based off the back of this question, asking whether like it was true or like it was kind of a sad state of affairs to have, they'll have to sell an academy product to go and buy an academy product from Middlesbrough. Like that seems like such a flawed system, or like selling a Cameron Archer and then going to buy someone else's youngsters. It just seems like a strange thing. Why not keep hold of your own youngsters and develop those? This kind of like sell to buy and open to offers and stuff. I think that's everyone, is it not? Like, is that not most clubs now?
Put it this way: if Bayern Munich offered 60 million for Jacob Ramsey in the summer, Villa would consider selling him because it's 60 million pure profit. You know, the kind of the immediacy of the situation of, at least in Ornstein's report, suggesting that Villa have to meet something by June to comply with FFP. That I think kind of makes it a bit of a a kind of a panic, if that makes sense. And that's why I'm suggesting that I don't know. I don't know how much Villa would have to raise, or if that's true or whatever. That I'm kind of, that's reported by Ornstein, and that's, fine. But what we do know is that if big money comes in for a Villa player in the summer, that will be considered, even if it is Jacob Ramsey, who is an academy product. And if PSR didn't exist, Nassef Sawiris and Wes Edens wouldn't consider selling an academy player because of what it means to the club, because of what it what it means for the area, that sort of thing. Yeah, exactly. And everyone wants to kind of look at that player. For example, Conor Gallagher as well with Chelsea. That's why they'd probably consider selling him, because they know that again would look good for their books. So that's the situation. If someone offers big money for Jacob Ramsey, Villa will consider that. And if it's deemed, a good enough offer, Jacob Ramsey will leave the club. It's just that simple. And that's nothing to do with, the report that's come out today. Those are just the facts of the situation. It's the same for every player in the team. Again, because PSR is so relevant right now, especially for Villa, who have spent a lot of money and are trying to close that gap and bridge the gap between themselves and the big six, not necessarily on the pitch, because where are we at the moment? Fourth. Hopefully we can finish in the Champions League positions this season. But for the revenue, it is very important. So yeah, I'm not sitting here suggesting that we are going to sell our players all of a sudden, and that is something that has to happen. Ornstein's report suggests that we will have to sell some players, okay, but then my kind of side of it is that if a big offer came in for any of our players in the summer, that will have to be considered irrelevant of the news of today. Those are just the facts that we knew weeks ago. So I don't want it to be like a huge panic. However, I'll admit I don't know the situation in terms of what we need to raise before June, for example, which was suggested in his column. And I wouldn't know because I don't have access to the books or anything, and I haven't been told by anyone either. So I'm not going to speculate over that. But we will ask Emery and we'll try and get answers. But I think that's something that we'll see more so in the next coming days, next weeks, about what that situation is.
Yeah, spot on. I think that's a nice way to kind of summarise the situation without being too heavy on speculation and kind of guessing. I don't want to come across that we're spouting truth and that we know what we're talking about. I'm saying that we don't know anything, but we're not going to guess at certain things. Right, next question. I'm going to leave you to it, John, for a second because there's someone at the door. I think I know who it is, so I'll only be a second. Jack says, do you think Villa have performed at their peak level yet, or is there still more to come? I'll be back in 2 minutes.
Okay. Have Villa performed at the peak level, or is there more to come? I think there is more to come. To be honest, I think you look at the last couple of weeks and teams are respecting Villa more. They're forcing Villa to play differently, and that is something that I don't doubt Unai Emery would have expected to happen. The loss of Pau Torres as well has been, huge in my opinion. But the next evolution of Villa is being a group of players who can adapt in different situations. We've seen how Emery's changed how we played from last season. It's been quite drastic, the way that we, not just the high line, but the way that we dominate in the opposition half. And that is, a big reason of that is Pau Torres, right? And he's been missing recently. So I think kind of twofold. The first evolution of that is Villa need to adapt to different opponents. We've seen Sheffield United nullify us. We've seen Burnley, do that to an extent. And yes, I think Villa were tired from games previously in December. But there's certainly kind of food for thought for other clubs to come to Villa Park and play in that way. And that's why I think the second half of the season is going to be so difficult. And then the other part of that is that, Villa need to be doing it without their key players as well. All the top teams, when they are missing some of their top players, different players will come in and they'll have different ways of playing. And that's not to suggest that Villa have to have like a completely drastic kind of plan B, but it's stepping up players like Longley, different players. Tielemans was missing for a bit, and I definitely missed him as well, and how he progressed the ball. So I think, as I say, twofold: adapting to when you don't have your top players, and then also adapting to the opposition as well. Because Villa are now one of the best teams in the Premier League, especially this season. So other teams will look at us and they'll see us as that scalp. They will come to Villa Park knowing the record that we've got. I think if we avoid defeat against Newcastle and Man United and Forest, that will be a year of no league defeats at Villa Park. So what have we won? 16 out of 17 as well. So people are starting to respect us more, and I think away from home as well. I'll say it again, I don't recall us actually playing kind of particularly well in any game. We've had some good results, but I can't look at one performance and suggest that it's, a kind of 9 out of 10 everyone played their role to perfection. And that isn't something that you have to have away from home when your home form's so good. But Villa have definitely got some work to do still, even though it's been a sensational season so far.
Well, John, I'm sure that was a brilliant answer, but I didn't hear any of it. I ran up and down the stairs twice. So I'm out of breath, but we'll move on with the rest of the show. I'll compose myself. There's 2 questions here in one. Probably you might have touched on some of this from the last question. If you have, we'll move straight past them. From Floyd, who said, the last half dozen games or so have been a struggle. Do you think we have hit our ceiling, or is there more to come from the team once injuries are behind us? And Dan says, Christ, I'm really out of breath. That's a problem. Are you concerned about the recent drop-off in performance levels? Feels as though we've lost our spark in attack, but wondering if the absence of Pau Torres could be a big reason why. Is that fair?
Yeah, covers most of what I just said then, to be fair. The loss of Torres is certainly been kind of a huge blow for Villa. What I'm more frustrated at is that he's obviously come back twice now, really, kind of come back in the Burnley game and aggravated his injury, then come back into training and aggravated it a bit more. Again, I'll be speaking to Emery later and he'll give an update on Torres, but that needs to be sorted because, you're looking at a player now who's missed pretty much a month or so, nearly, or no, it's more than a month now. Month of action, really. And he needs to be fit because he is crucial to Villa. And in terms of us kind of struggling or not kind of lighting up the world as we were at the start of the season, I can live with that as long as we're getting results. And I did put a fair amount of kind of attribution to our kind of struggles towards the end of the year down to fitness. We looked a bit lethargic mentally as well as much as physically. So I need to see in the next couple of weeks, how are Villa going to step up to playing Newcastle, which obviously last year we kind of blitzed them 3-0 and one of the best performances Villa have had, really in years gone by. So and Sheffield United away too. So how are we going to perform in those games? Because we shouldn't be physically, fatigued or anything like that. So, yeah. And then the other part, as I just mentioned earlier, teams are respecting Villa more. Villa are now seen as a Champions League contender. If we played Brighton tomorrow at home, would we win 6-1 against them again? I don't think so, because they'd be more respectful of us. They wouldn't go toe-to-toe, that sort of thing. So it will be a very difficult second half of the season. And this is why it's so important at the moment to keep chipping away at those points, because once the Conference League starts up again and we've got more games to play, maybe we'll go on an FA Cup run. If we can win our next 2 home games, we're in the quarter-final, aren't we? So there's lots of games potentially to be played. That's then more pressure on the players to perform in the Premier League as well. So it's going to be a very hectic second half of the season. So you'd hope that in the next couple of games, we can get their points and kind of prove that, okay, they've adapted and they are as impressive as they were at the start of the season, I think.
Yeah, I think when we talk about like a peak of Aston Villa, like that Man City game, it's like been the best, hasn't it? That's kind of been like the benchmark. And it has been difficult since then. Dropped points against Sheffield United, threw away the lead at Man United, the 0-0, Chelsea, which we talked about it for the FA Cup. It's not the end of the world because you've got the replay. It wasn't never going to be an easy game per se, but it just feels like the mood has dropped a little bit. I don't know, it's like Dan here in the comments on Facebook, but this mood is generally seen a lot across social media, who says, I really think we'll start to drop off now. We don't look the same team as before Christmas, and others are starting to see through our game plan. And there's an element of that I do agree with, that not that we've been not found out, but we struggle against a certain way of playing from the opposition. If they're going to sit in deep, we struggle against that. So you kind of think, well, that's the way to stop Villa, that's the way to beat them. I don't think we'll drop off to the extent that we fall out of the top 5, which would still be a huge achievement for us. But that kind of opinion is still quite widely out there, that Villa might struggle a bit now.
But that's why I think in the next couple of weeks it's going to be so important, because that's going to tell us, is it or was Villa's kind of drop off to an extent? Although we've only lost 2 games in however long, but because we were winning all the time and it was so kind of euphoric and Villa were playing so well and scoring so many goals. We've scored once in 3 games now. But we've had a bit of a break. We've had a bit of downtime. We should be, energised, ready to go again. So I think now we'll know, are Villa going to adapt in the second half of the season, or was it just kind of, as I said, mental fatigue? They needed a break. If we go out and beat Newcastle, convincingly, we win at Sheffield United, the kind of comments about Villa not being able to adapt and they're going to struggle again, I think they go away, to be honest, until we then draw a game. So I think I totally agree, by the way, with what Dan said, but I think it's a bit reactionary to say that we are going to drop off. I don't think we know that yet. I think there's a reason to suggest it, but let's see what happens in the next month or so of games. If we beat Man United and Newcastle, all of a sudden we have a huge gap towards those two teams. 5th place, is ours, really. Then of course we have to do our job, and there's lots of games to play. But if we can beat those teams, if we can get something at Sheffield United, which won't be easy, then I wouldn't suggest there's a reason to say that we're going to drop off. I think it's just what's going to happen in the next coming week. So I understand the sentiment from what we've seen in the last month. But this is now for me the second half of the season, and it's going to be very difficult. But if Villa can get their points over the next 2 months before the Conference League really starts to ramp up again, then they're going to be in a good place.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, let's move on. Next question is from Radioactive Duck, which might be the best username I've seen for a while. It says, more podcast related than Villa, but I've been binging the Football Manager series on the streams that you did. Any chance of that series coming back? We have mentioned a few times that we wanted to bring this back. I mean, Dan Bardell spoke a few times about, can we record next week? Oh, no, I'm too busy. What about the week after? Oh, then I'm too busy. And we just never found a date to get it in the bag. We did talk about doing like a January transfer one and things like that. So it was considered, but we're just both very busy at the moment to nail down a definitive yes to that. I would love to, because it's fun to do and we both enjoyed it. But we were both very busy with various different things. I'm more busy at work now than I was before with different responsibilities that I won't go into. So I would love to, but I can't give a definitive answer on that one. And probably the next question doesn't have a definitive answer either from you, John. A simple one from Ben. Any news on the new crest yet? And we thought at one stage it was coming imminently when we spoke about this, maybe at the back end of December or the start of January, that Villa had said in the new year, and it felt like it could be like this week, and then it all went very quiet. Is that the last update?
Yeah, there's no update. The next update, I presume, will be when the badge is officially unveiled. It was shown to the fan board days before it got leaked. So that's kind of, it's not the latest. Well, that is the latest news, although it was a while ago. Heck said that it would be the start of the year and kind of inferred that it would be imminently. So yeah, still waiting for it any day now. But although we have been saying that for the last couple of weeks, that should be the case. I don't know if there is a hold up. I don't know why that would be the case, but yeah, it should be any time now.
Yeah, and we'll say that again in 6 weeks' time when we're asked the question and it's still not out. Could be any time. Next up is John, who says there's two questions here. We'll answer them separately. Did you watch any of the India versus England cricket? John, are you into cricket?
To be honest, I'm not. My attention span is not nowhere near long enough to watch cricket. No, I was watching the Black Country Derby. I saw England were doing well, which is great. But
yeah,
sorry, John, I don't watch cricket. Unfortunately, I don't tend to watch many of the sports profit football. I mean, I watch Wimbledon. Although obviously that's tennis, and I watch boxing, watch the darts at Christmas, but there's not much else that I watch.
Yeah, watch the big events of other sports.
Yeah, it's too football's too absorbing. Like for me, anyway, I can't. You know, I saw Sinner won the tennis. Like was it the Australian Open? I think I didn't watch that, but I caught some highlights of it and stuff. But there's no, I have no appetite to wake up in the early hours as whatever to watch. I used to watch the F1, to be fair, until that got extremely boring with Verstappen winning it all the time. And I get, fair play is good at F1, but like I think that sort of sport needs competition. It needs a bit of rivalry. Sorry, but no, football's enough. I think, to be honest, apart from any other sport, it's too much involved in it. Like these days, you need to be a bloody accountant to work out transfers and stuff. Don't you? There's too much. It's not just 3 o'clock on a Saturday anymore, is it? It's every day of the week. There's news and stuff to write about in our job anyway. So
I was going to say that's part of the job as well. I imagine as a fan, you could probably switch up more so than we could. But yeah, I don't cricket a no go. F1 I do watch more so than you do. Tennis, so yeah, maybe would watch like the Wimbledon final, maybe like the darts finals and stuff. Maybe watch the big events just because everyone's talking about it. I feel like I have to, but cricket I don't actually like it either. So even if everyone was talking about it, I wouldn't feel like I need to watch 3 days of Test cricket or whatever it is.
It's not bad cricket. If I like parts of it, it's just a bit too slow. The one that I don't get is the NFL. I don't understand it.
No idea.
I know a lot of people like it and they like the kind of everything that goes around it, but I only ever watch the Super Bowl, like 10 minutes of the Super Bowl, every year, and they'll have like a massive build up for it and everyone's getting hyped and like psyched for it, and then all of a sudden they have a break like 2 seconds into the match and I'm like, what was that about? And then they all go back and do a team talk, and it happens every 2 minutes. So yeah, I don't know how you can kind of get into that sort of thing. Like it needs to be like, I don't know. Yeah, football is the sport for me, and that won't be changing.
Yeah, me too. The second part of John's question was, you must be happy with the FA Cup draw. No, but the first part of the show was about performances and on the pitch. The middle part of the show is about the FA Cup, and the last part of the show will be back to transfers. The FA Cup draw is pretty good, wasn't it? Home again in the next round if we get past Chelsea, which is nice, against lower league opposition again, which again something Villa don't really tend to get, although we don't get past the third round, so we don't get opportunity to do that. But it always just feels like Villa play away against a bigger club, or sorry, above them in the league. And it's the way around now. We're at home against lower league opposition. If we get past Chelsea in the home game, that's the replay, which I feel like we will. It's Leeds or Plymouth in the fifth round, is it? Pretty good. Yeah, happy with that.
Yeah, 2 games away from a quarterfinal, then 1 game away from Wembley. So it's the draw itself for Villa was brilliant. A home to a lower league side, you can't ask for much more than that. However, the only thing I'd say is the rest of the draw wasn't good, if that makes sense, because none of the big teams are really playing each other. If Villa get past Chelsea, then they get past Leeds or Plymouth. There's a high probability you're playing, City, Liverpool, Newcastle, Brighton or Wolves. There's another decent side in there as well, but forget who. Man United, did I say them? And then you've got like a Coventry maybe. So there's like a 1 in 7 chance we could get, a team that would be favourites. Well, no, not favourite. Would be favourites to beat a Bournemouth or a Wolves or Brighton, I think. But you get my gist. I think if Villa are at home in the quarterfinal, unless it's against the Liverpool or Man City, I'd back us to get to Wembley then. So it is exciting. If Villa can get the next 2 rounds out of the way and we're drawn at home, then all of a sudden you're thinking, right, let's do it. Let's get to Wembley. And again, that won't be easy because Chelsea, they haven't been great away from home. We have been good at home. But while I put us as favourites for that game, I'm not particularly convinced that we're going to, I don't know. I just got a bit of a funny feeling that domestic cups just aren't happening.
I don't think it'll be easy, but
no.
Chelsea mid-table now, like they've still got good players, and the away leg showed that they will make moments and create chances. I'd like to think Pau Torres might be back for that Chelsea game. We're at home, we're then a better side, so possibly, who knows? I think we'll get through against Chelsea. I think we should get through against lower league opposition, but absolutely no guarantees at all. So
we need a bit of luck in that. If we get through, we just need a bit of luck in that draw for the quarterfinal. If we can get at home,
everyone does as well.
Yeah, you just don't want to be going to a Premier League team. I think that would be very difficult. But good draw.
Good draw, and hopefully we go all the way, of course. But I don't want to start talking about possible quarterfinals and possible Wembley dates, and we've still got to get through a replay first, which I do still think we will do. But 2 games before we even talk about a quarterfinal, never mind a semi. Adrian says, discuss the ticket prices for the Chelsea FA Cup replay. I'm hopeful that it's not on the Everton scale again. Do you feel like the club may have learned a lesson from that Everton League Cup tickets, that they need to price the Chelsea replay reasonably or fairly? Although they'd probably claim that the Everton tickets were priced reasonably, but the fan outrage, I suppose, for want of a better phrase, would say otherwise. Is it going to be a £25 ticket for a replay, or is it a 45 one? What do you think they'll do?
The Everton game was it was a disaster really, because the atmosphere, the crowd, it didn't feel like a cup game. And the Carabao Cup, we said previously, was that's a great route to to get to a final and have something to win early in the season, because I don't think it would have affected us in the group stage. I think we would have topped it anyway. So that was very frustrating, and whether the club will price the tickets differently or not, I don't know. We'll find out pretty soon, I presume. And if I'm going to be honest, I don't think there will be a huge difference to what it was against Everton, because that was the price of a cup game at home, and we're playing Chelsea as well, who will be classed as a kind of, I don't know what the categories are called anymore, but one of the top categories. Yeah, whether it's a replay or not, I don't really think that comes into it, to be honest. So we'll find out. But do I expect a major difference in prices? No, I don't.
No, I would like, again, the club to be the club that goes, I'm going to make a difference here and do something different, and say £15 tickets for a replay, and really fill it out and make a great atmosphere and get us through to, it's obviously every cup game is a 1-game shootout to the next round, but when you've got the opportunity to have a replay, it's like, okay, now this is the final time. If we lose this is it. Get everything on your side to get us through that game with a kind of tasty looking next round lower league opposition tie in front of you as well. So I'd love us to do something like that and say cheap tickets, let's fill the house and get a rocking atmosphere. But when we also talk about the club needing to make as much revenue as possible, maybe they do need to say 40 quid a ticket, 45 quid a ticket, and hope that still brings in a decent number. Who knows?
I know. Yeah, it's a horrible argument to make. I mean, you are right. I don't mean you're horrible. It's a horrible argument to make about the kind of, we talk about FFP, PSR, whatever it's called, Villa needing to make revenue, and then it kind of has to come back on the fans, and you think,
Well, yeah.
But that's football nowadays. Unfortunately, it is a business, and no one likes it. But yeah, we won't get drawn into that conversation now. But if they price it as high as they did for Everton, there's a reason why they've done it, and it's not that they don't want Villa Park to sell out. They think it will sell enough tickets if whatever they price it at. There's a strategy behind it, but it would just be unfortunate again if they do that, because there is a cost of living crisis and it's an FA Cup replay. Although Villa can go far in the competition, I think. There's a pricing strategy, and that's it, which is a shame.
Yeah. We'll talk about more. We'll talk about the Chelsea game replay specifically. It'll be next midweek, won't it? I think it's looking like it's going to be the Wednesday. Villa play on the Saturday this weekend. Chelsea play on the Sunday against Wolves. So we assumed it was going to be Wednesday the 7th, I think it is. So we'll talk about that more on next week's Monday show, which might be an in-person one, unsure at the moment. On with the rest of the questions then. This one from the Welsh Brummie, who says, do you see Tim Irabunam playing better in a defensive midfield partnership with Douglas Luiz or Boubacar Kamara?
Good question. I haven't actually thought of specifically like who we'd play with. At QPR last season, he wasn't, Tim kind of comes across as a player who was a holding midfielder because he's played there as a young player and for the England age groups as well. But for QPR, he had the kind of license for, he had a bit of freedom. He'd be going forward. He wouldn't be kind of, playing as a 6 necessarily, just standing in front of the back line. So I think, to be honest, it's a bit of a cop-out, but I think you can use him in either situation, which I think is a big plus. He's obviously versatile in that respect. However, I think we need to see what Emery wants of him yet, and he's played about 4 minutes this season, so we don't know. He can do both, but again, what I know in terms of will he play better with Luiz or Kamara, if you take either one of those out of your team, there's a huge gap in terms of Luiz comes out, where's the creativity? And if Kamara comes out, where's that kind of defensive now? And I think that's something that Tim has. So I'd probably say him and Luiz would probably be better as a duo. But again, it depends on the context of the game. If Villa want to, shut up shop or whatever, then bring Tim on, and you're not going to take Kamara off, are you? So I think it depends on the context. What's for sure is that Tim won't be starting games unless, of course, Kamara's unavailable. I'm a bit surprised that he's given him the kind of trust, not because I don't rate Tim. I think he's a good player. He's got a lot to learn, but because he's only played once this season, and granted he was injured at the start and therefore had limited opportunity to kind of make an impression. But Emery's clearly seen something to kind of give him, as I say, that trust. I was just a bit surprised to hear him say that Villa wouldn't be going after another midfielder. I hope the Dendoncker decision doesn't, or we're not kicking ourselves after that, because I think that's a player that we could have sold in the summer anyway. There's no guarantee that Napoli actually buy him for, £8 million, which would, I think that would be a good sale. But I just think Villa have got such a potentially busy, hopefully busy anyway, second half of the season. I think Dendoncker would have been, I think we could have kept him for the rest of the season, put it that way. And it's an option that I think would rather have than not, but clearly Emery doesn't think so. So I'll trust this decision over mine.
Just as an offshoot to the Irabunam question, this is the kind of reason I put it in, really. I saw a conversation on social media before we started, which I'm going to call a conspiracy theory, which is totally unfair because it could be a genuine thought that somebody has had that could turn out to be true. But for now, I'll go with conspiracy theory. They were talking about, this is off the back of the Jacob Ramsey story, the first thing in The Athletic, and the line about Villa need to make up some kind of money before June, words to that effect. And they were suggesting that Kane Kessler-Hayden has come back into the squad. Likewise, Tim Irabunam is staying around because they're homegrown players, and you have to have a certain homegrown quota, which Villa don't have loads of. So if Jacob Ramsey was to leave, they kind of take his place in the squad, which I say conspiracy theory. That makes sense. That's fine. I don't think Ramsey will leave in January anyway. So I don't think that's relevant for now, but I can see where that they've kind of seen the dots and thought they connect. That's fine. The other side of it, they called it, and I don't know who this is, by the way. I should have found it again before we started to give them the credit in case this is true. But they also said it was like a plumping up or like a fattening process, like turkeys at Christmas. You feed them loads of stuff to make them fat, and they sell them for more money. That like you get somebody like Kane Kesler-Hayden back into Villa or keep Tim Irubenham to play, fatten them up, get them ready to then sell them. That like the Cameron Archer, Aaron Ramsey kind of process. That's
what has
Villa's
football
like.
become?
Exactly,
God.
yeah, and that's the workaround.
Yeah.
Rather than selling your Boubacar Kamara for 70 million, you make Tim Irubenham a 10 million player. You make Kane Kesler-Hayden a 12 million player, and you sell them off with buyback clauses, as we've seen with Archer and Ramsey and Philogene. That's the way that Villa make profit now. They find good youngsters for very cheap or academy products, fatten them up, and then sell them for probably small fees in the grand scheme of things, but enough to just keep Villa ticking over. Is that a conspiracy theory, or is that a possibility?
Of course, it's a possibility. The only thing I'd say is that Kane Kesler-Hayden is only going to play if cash is unavailable, and only going to play if it's in a game that suits what he gives, which is obviously an attacking. He would be an attacking outlet like Cash is when he plays on the right, and Konsa plays when Villa want to be more defensively secure. Those are the words of Emery. So I don't think Kesler-Hayden, for example, his price will increase necessarily in the next few weeks and months unless he makes such an impression that he's actually playing and contributing. Tim, yes, he could play more games again, but I go back to the Dendoncker thing. I just think, if you had to select between the two to come on and nullify a game, I think you choose the Dendoncker, I think. But again, I'm not one to kind of undermine any decision that Monchi or Emery makes. It's just my opinion. But no, the comment is correct. Villa, we've just spoken about Ramsey and pure profit. That is the way to raise money. If you have to balance your books on PSR. So we'll see. I think probably those players playing games week in, week out in the Championship would probably be more beneficial for them if we wanted to sell them. Just my opinion. But I understand for sure the kind of, that argument.
We're going to talk about Morgan Rogers next. There's 3 questions for him. There's also one that's coming as we're live about Unai Emery that I have to get out of the way because I'm fearful that we might run out of time and miss it. I'm surprised that no one asked this on Twitter when I asked for questions yesterday. From Nate Wiggin, who says, "Are you worried about Liverpool or Barcelona coming in for Unai Emery?" I'm amazed that's the first time anyone's asked that question and it wasn't brought up earlier. We've spoken a lot about Unai Emery on this podcast over the last 18 months, naturally. Some of those are big, glowing, gushing, we love this man, he can do no wrong podcasts. And that's fair enough, in my opinion. He's done miracles at Aston Villa to my eyes. And we've spoken a lot about how he's been given all the tools at Villa to succeed. The whole club is essentially built around him. The owners have put a lot of faith in him. They've given him some money to spend, of course. They've given him the tools to do his job better. They've got his staff in. They've got Monchi in with him, who he knows. They've got Damien Vidagani in there, who he knows well. They've got shares, or whatever the phrase is, in Real Union, Unai Emery's family club. They've done a lot of things for this man to make me feel like he's not going to go, "Oh, the Liverpool job's available. See you later. The Barcelona job is available. See you later. I'm going to go for that now." Yeah. Barcelona one slightly more so. I think I could see him managing Barcelona or Real Madrid more so than a Liverpool. But the current iteration of Barcelona, who have basically no money to spend, I don't see that working out at all for Unai Emery, especially now. Like, why leave now? Maybe 5 years' time, possibly, yes. Liverpool's an interesting one. I actually don't think they would go for Emery. And I don't think he would go there. It reeks to me of like replacing Wenger at Arsenal, which he's already done once. You kind of want to be the guy after the replacement, don't you? You want to be the replacement after Klopp rather than the direct replacement to him. You want to be after David Moyes at Man United rather than after Ferguson. However, having said all that, and I'm not saying this is a case for him to go, I do feel like Liverpool and the way they treat a manager is what would suit Unai Emery to a certain extent, that you kind of become the figurehead at a club like that. And I think that suits Emery. However, he's got that here at Villa. So why? I know Liverpool are Liverpool and what they are, but why ditch the Villa project 18 months in for Liverpool? Do you agree?
Yeah, I do agree. Firstly, on Barcelona, I've said this before, but I don't think Emery doing what he's done at Villa for the last 18 months or so. I don't think that 18 months, sorry, not that far, 14 months or so now, isn't it? What he's done, I don't think that kind of tells Barcelona or anyone in Spain anything about Emery that they didn't know already. I think it was only people in England that needed to kind of be taught a lesson, I suppose, about Emery and football. So I don't, I think Barcelona would have probably gone for Emery before if they thought he was the man. And just on top of that as well, Emery needs a structure to work in. We've seen what he's done at Villa in terms of, as you say, Damian and Monchi, other people as well, the scouts he's brought into the club and the connections that NSWE have kind of forged since he's been appointed. None of that applies at Barcelona, and I understand that Barcelona are one of the biggest clubs in world football, but Emery wouldn't, even if they offered him it. Do I know what he'd say? Of course I don't, unless he's asked it in his press conference. Yeah, I don't want to let him know that the Barcelona job's going up for grabs, but he would think, straight away, well, what power do I have, and who am I working with? And Barcelona at the moment are one of the worst run clubs. Not comparable to some of the teams in League Two in England and stuff. I just mean, but in terms of
the big boys of the big clubs, Bayern Munich, Liverpool, everyone, Barcelona will be at the bottom of that list of an attractive proposition.
Yeah, because of how they use the finance and where they think they're going as a club. There's no direction at all. And then on Liverpool again, I don't think they would go for Emery anyway, if I'm being totally honest, because I think they need someone who's a bit more maybe charismatic and can kind of lead that club from not just kind of being a manager who gets results. I think they need something a bit more. I don't know who they'd go for, if I'm honest. I think Xabi Alonso could be that guy. De Zerbi, I'm sure they'd consider. There's probably the candidates in the frame as well, but I don't see them going after Emery, if I'm being totally honest, because I think, again, a lot of his success, Emery, has been because he's been allowed to just focus on his football. He's got, as we keep saying, the people behind him, the people he's been allowed to bring into the football club. That's a major reason why he's having so much success, because he's not focusing on everything else, which Klopp was. He mentioned in his interview that he's so tired and he's kind of just gassed out now because he's got so much more to do than just manage his players coach his players, whereas Emery has got less tasks. He works as hard as more than anyone probably else in the Premier League in terms of, he probably sleeps at bottom, all that sort of thing. But that's solely to coach the players, not to do everything else, which is, the many more jobs that Klopp did as well. And I'd expect the new Liverpool manager would take on a lot of those tasks as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to use the word charismatic, and this is just a thought completely off the top of my head, and it's probably such a lazy link, so I'm just going with the Spanish thing. But the Liverpool kind of connection to me feels that Emery would be more of a fit like a Rafa Benitez at Liverpool, who's a very successful manager for them, but he's not the same kind of, from an external opinion, of course, I'm not a Liverpool fan, he's not the same kind of character as a Jurgen Klopp. But now they've had a taste of that for 7 or 8 years, is it? That he's like the guy, he leads everything, he's the one. He's kind of their king, if you like. Rafa Benitez wasn't that. He didn't have that same kind of personality. And I love Unai Emery, and you're right. I don't know whether he would have that same kind of command that Jurgen Klopp has, or that character has. As a coach, absolutely, yeah, he's right up there. So I don't think that he's a great fit for Liverpool as a personality. But I do think, as I said before, like having a talismanic-like figure, I think Emery can be that, because he's that for us. But I'm not sure that he quite fit in at Liverpool. So no, to the original question, I'm not worried.
Klopp's taken a lot of heat off FSG as well. That ownership part as well. There's these huge questions over that, but then Klopp's completely taken everything out of it. So they'll be, nervous now about the next appointment, because, the Zerbi could easily just call them out in a press conference or something. So they have to be very careful that manager is someone capable of what. Sorry, I need water. Someone that's working with them, not just get results, but be, as you say, Dan, much more than just a coach who works with the players on the pitch. And I'm not saying that Emery's limited to just that, by the way. I'm just saying that that's what he wants, and that's what he's got at Villa. So why would he go elsewhere to take on more jobs, more responsibility, when there's absolutely no kind of guarantee of success? And as you said earlier, he's already done the post Wenger, that role that's been, it's been labelled as. So post Klopp, I don't think it's something that something that Villa fans should be worried about.
Yeah, I totally agree. We're going to move on to the Morgan Rogers stuff now. So I did say we would talk about it. There's 3 questions about him. First one from Darren. He says, are we getting excited about a championship player that has struggled to break into the first team at every other club he's been at because he's a great player or because Unai Emery wants to sign him? Brackets, I think Middlesbrough are taking the P on the price as well. He didn't say P, but you can work out what he did say.
I really like Morgan Rogers. Actually, I think he's a very, very talented player. He's raw, as is John Duran. We've seen other players come into the club and do well, that have got the kind of the raw skills and raw attributes, but it's getting that player to a level that he can fulfill his potential, and that's something that Unai Emery, I know, will be able to do. So I want Villa to sign Morgan Rogers, and I'd be delighted to see us complete that deal if we do. And I don't know what the next questions are, Dan, but clearly there's a gap in valuation. 3 bids now been turned down by Borough, and fair enough, they've stood firm on their valuation because they signed him back in the summer. They know that Premier League clubs, although PSR is looming over everybody, apart from the big 6, that they have money. So there's no, reason to suggest that all of a sudden Middlesbrough are just going to knock down the valuation by a few £1 million or whatever. But I really like Morgan Rogers, and as I say, he's a player that's got all the attributes to be a success in the Premier League and be a top player. But it's what move for him is best to get that out of him. And I think, firstly, he sees Villa as a huge opportunity because they're doing well, but also you've got Unai Emery, who he knows will improve him. He's a player, just speaking to people that he knows, have got a piece ready in case he does sign. Hopefully he signs. And they all said that his attitude to improve is excellent. He is a willing learner. He is a player who his best footballs come under people like Michael Appleton, Michael Carrick, coaches who coach properly. They'll sit you down and say, this is what I want you to become and here's how you're going to do it. And that's how it's come about being a player now that Unai Emery wants to sign. So I would be very excited if he signed for the club. I really would. I think there's not a lot that you can look at in terms of, but he's only scored this amount of goals in the Championship and he's only done this, he's only done that. That's, to me, vastly irrelevant. If you want to go down that route, he's got the most goals in the Carabao Cup, and I think he's got 5 goal contributions in his last 7 games. So he's clearly turned that around. He's now settled at Middlesbrough, playing for a team who relied on Chuba Akpom, Cameron Archer and Aaron Ramsey last year, who are all now not there. So it was always going to be a struggle for Borough at the start of the season. It's going to be difficult for him to settle. He's moving up to Teesside. He doesn't know anyone there. He was 20 when he made that move. He's 21 at the moment. So I think now he's starting to show those kind of doubters about what kind of talent he does have, and I think that's reflected in his price. Borough bought him for cheap and realised, we actually have a player here now, that's ready to kind of make that move, and that's why they've set the price that they have, and that's also why Emery wants him. So I'm excited by it, and I think if he joins Villa, there's certainly a player there that I think will flourish under Emery in the years to come. But yeah, and just as a side note, obviously him moving back to back to the West Midlands as well, I think would benefit him too.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the point I was going to make when you talk about stats and stuff. The next question, if I find the right tab, was from Simon. He says, when we signed Alex Moreno, the reaction on social media was negatively over the top. So why are so many getting their knickers in a twist? It's great saying that is, about potentially signing Morgan Rogers rather than just trusting that Unai Emery might know better than they do. You mentioned his stats. A few comments coming in live as we talk. Steve says Morgan's stats are not good. Andy says Morgan is not better than Archer. Simple. Christopher asks, is Morgan Rogers a cheap Jacob Ramsey replacement? Morgan is being hyped. I hadn't heard of him until recently. His stats are okay, to be honest. 33 appearances this season, 7 goals, 8 assists for a 21-year-old. 5 of those goals in the League Cup, as you mentioned. 2 goals, 6 assists in the Championship from 14 starts, 12 sub-appearances. Yeah, obviously it's not glowing, but you're talking about a 15 million player, not a £40 million player.
Yeah, Ollie Watkins had 2 goals before Emery took over, and now he's the second best striker in the Premier League. There really isn't much you can take from just looking at stat websites and saying he's got this amount of goals. You need to, look at the underlying numbers, look at how he plays against Chelsea. He'd run at players, and yes, he'd lose the ball a few times, but then he'd score a brilliant goal at the end of the game. He's 21, he's raw, but he's got a lot of potential. Emery wants him. Emery's one of the best coaches in European football. That's the sell for me already. Like
Yeah,
I'd be very excited if he joined. I know he's a player that Manchester City were desperate to sign when he was 17. I know, players join clubs and it doesn't always work out, but City pushed the boat out to get him from West Brom. He didn't want to leave West Brom at the time, but West Brom, as a financial decision, sold him for £4 million. And then he's had different loan moves, and those loan moves might not have looked like it looked like it had worked. Sorry, if you go on stat websites and you look at how many games he's played, he didn't start many games at Bournemouth. But those experiences are what shapes a player. That's the big thing. Like Harry Kane, for example, he went on different loan moves, had a bit of success some places, didn't play at others, and look what that made of him. So this is a player who's got an attitude to learn and improve. He's not coming to Villa for, they're offering me more money or whatever. That might not even be the case. I don't know. He wants to come to Villa to improve as a footballer. He knows that he'd settle straight away. He knows Jacob Ramsey, Kane Kessler, Timmy Rubenham, Steve Hopcroft, Mark Harrison, all these people at the club. I just think it's a move that makes sense for all parties. Borough think otherwise, and they obviously want to keep him, which again speaks volumes to the player that he is, because they know that they could get money for him if they wanted now, but they know that they want to. They know that they could get more, and they could probably get more in the summer potentially as well, because he's probably going to have a good second half of the season. If he gets, what's expected of him, I don't know, 15 goals potentially, which would be a lot for the second half of the season, but the form that he's showing is, kind of correlates to that really. Then you'd be looking at more money again. So, yeah, I really like him. And I think it's definitely a player that would improve Villa, maybe not straight away, but in the coming years. And that's the aim of the game.
Yeah, the 3 words you said about 2 minutes ago, Emery wants him. That's enough for me. Like, I'm very simplistic in this approach. That if we sign him and I don't rate him, it means absolutely nothing. Like, if I don't think he's any good, but we sign him, doesn't matter, does it? I can't influence the decision at all. If Unai Emery, Monchi, and the team of scouts around him, they all trust and work together well, yes, not every sign they make is going to work. But if those guys think this is worth doing now for 15-odd million in January, rather than wait for him to have a decent second half of the season and Borough want 25 million, then I trust them to go and do it. There's there's few coaches in the Premier League that can have proven to coach young players better than Unai Emery. There's probably 2 or 3 in the entire league that I would think, okay, put them in that team and they'll probably be a better player for it. Yeah. And as we said before, a couple of weeks ago with Ndelkovic, even if Morgan Rogers doesn't become an outstanding success like an Ollie Watkins, who we think is now world class and is worth 70, 80 million or whatever, at 15 million and 21 years old, if he's okay for Villa aren't going to lose anything. It's such a low risk deal, really, in the grand scheme of things. 15, 17 million, whatever it is Borough actually want and what it finally settles on. Do you know what I mean? That even if we sell him to a Bournemouth in 2 years' time, we're probably going to make most of our money back. Like, it's such a low risk, high potential reward.
The point you make is right, Dan. I do think the money that we're going to put up for him, though, will be kind of more of a risk than, because
we spent 99 million on John Duran, and he hadn't done anything before coming either.
No, I know, but if John Duran doesn't work out, then that's nearly 20 million down the drain. So I get your point about like Neveljkovic 6 million or rising to 9 or whatever it is. That's I think that is quite low risk. But I think for Rodgers, you are paying a pretty decent chunk for a player who is playing well in the Championship. I think that's more of a risk as such. But you are right. There's a huge amount of upturn. There's a lot of promise in the player, and certainly the player could go on to be worth a lot more than that. So I certainly take your point there.
Yeah, probably the flip side of that argument is I don't think it would not be a success. I think there is potential there for this to be a player that works. I'm hoping it does, but I think that will be the case. Villa have got a decent record of signing players from the Championship over the last few years, and Emery has got a good track record of coaching youth players. So if Morgan Rogers is talented, Villa will find something within him, and hopefully that will benefit Aston Villa directly in their first team. And if it doesn't, it will help their balance sheets in 3-4 seasons' time. The final question of the show comes from Connor, who says, and this is the case of Morgan Rogers has signed and will sign. He says, do you feel like the Morgan Rogers signing will mean Moussa Diaby plays out wide and Rogers plays the second striker role? Or is it just a case of him coming in and working his way in wherever he gets a chance?
Yeah, well, this is the interesting part because he's a very versatile player, which is obviously something that works in his favour. Rogers, he can play on, I think, predominantly off the left is probably, his preferred position as such, kind of like Rashford always says that, doesn't he? He's kind of similar in that regard. But he can play behind a striker or as a striker as well. So I think it'll be interesting to see what Emery wants from him, and if he was to sign, when he sits him down and says, "This is what I want from you," I want to be in that conversation because I don't know myself what exactly he has planned. If Rodgers joins, does that mean Duran is then third choice striker? I don't know. And then is there a situation this summer where Duran would then leave? Again, that's just literal speculation. I'm not sure. Or would he kind of compete for that position on the left with Jacob Ramsey, and where Tielemans is playing that kind of half space there? So what we are getting, though, is a player that can play across a number of positions. And again, that's a big bonus. It's not just the kind of attributes and potential that he has. This is a player that can be moulded into basically anything that Emery wants, which again is a major reason why he's so interested in the player.
Mm-hmm. Okay, then we'll call it a day there, John. I know you wanted to be finished by 12. It's 11:59, so timekeeping on the spot today. Thank you very much for giving your time. You're at Bodymore Heath this afternoon to speak to Unai Emery. Yeah. Any breaking lines from that will be on the Birmingham Live website and your social media pages. We won't do another podcast now before the Newcastle game, so consider this our Newcastle preview, which we've not really talked about Newcastle at all. Which I think I put Newcastle in the title to begin with, so I'm going to have to change that for the audio version. Very quickly, do you think we'll win tomorrow? What's score prediction? So I can write it down for our document.
God, I think it'll be a draw, to be honest. But I'll say 2-1 Villa.
2-1 Villa. Okay, I'll make a note of that for later. Newcastle preview done in 30 seconds. John, thanks for joining me. Thanks everyone for watching along live on YouTube or Facebook. Thanks for your questions and comments. Hopefully I've integrated them okay throughout. If you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts, get involved in the rating system there. Leave us a review. All those things are very helpful. We'll be back next time with the post-match show for Newcastle United, which will be tomorrow very late. I don't expect to get home till 11:30, so it'll be a quick 20-25 minute one tomorrow evening, Tuesday, and then it's Sheffield United on Saturday, so we will have an Inside Bodymore preview show for that later in the week, and it's deadline day, isn't it, on Thursday morning?
Thursday, 11 p.m.
11 p.m. I was thinking it was like the Wednesday night, but it's the end of Thursday. Okay. So if Villa do sign Morgan Rodgers or anyone else, and we feel like we need to talk about them in more detail, we will do a bonus show on Wednesday or Thursday. So plenty of content coming on Claret and Blue this week. Stay tuned, stay subscribed, and we'll see you tomorrow evening. Cheers, everyone.